In this video, we're going to address a hodgepodge of different Koine Greek pronouns. Most of the forms of these pronouns are going to be very, very recognizable to you based on the very good work that you've already done in this course with the memorization of forms. What I want to do to start our video here is start with a recall and preview quiz. So what I've done here is I've given us sort of a grammatical recall of some questions about pronouns that you may remember the answers to. These are things we've covered before, and I've mixed in there some previews to what is to come as well. And the purpose of this is to get you guessing about some of the material that I'm going to present in this video, because if you make a guess about something and then either correct that guess or are given information about that guess, you are much more likely to remember it. So go ahead and grab your whiteboard, pause the lecture here, and answer this review and preview quiz. And then we're actually going to move on to a second one on the next slide here, but we're just going to take them one at a time. So let's go ahead and pause and answer these 5 questions. All right, let's go ahead and high five for our work on the quick quiz. 1, 2, 3, high five. So, some review, some new information here. What is a pronoun? A pronoun is a word that stands in place of another noun, usually one that has already been introduced in the context of a discourse. A pronoun is going to match that other noun, namely its antecedent, in gender and in number, but not necessarily in case. Remember, a pronoun can change its case based on its function in a sentence, but the word to which it refers from the previous context, its antecedent, it will match that in gender and in number. We've seen, so you might have answered this question a couple of different ways. You might have given specific Greek pronouns, and if you did, that's awesome, way to go. I was thinking about classes of pronouns. We've seen the types of pronouns we've seen are personal pronouns and demonstrative pronouns. And you might have been able, if you got this question right, you might have been able to guess this question, that a relative pronoun, like all other pronouns, is going to match its antecedent in gender and in number, but not necessarily in case. And then questions expecting a yes answer in Greek begin with the word ou. So this is new material from the Black lesson for this week. Questions that expect a negative answer are going to be introduced with the negative particle may. So if I wanted to say, you like pizza, don't you? In English, that don't you at the end expects that you do like pizza, that you're going to say, yes, I do like pizza. If Greek were to ask that question, it would introduce the question with an ou. If I were to ask something like something that expected a negative answer, and I'm drawing a blank on a good example here. Let's think. You're not going to do that, are you? My framing of the question implies that no, you're not going to do that. If I'm going to ask my children, you're not going to draw on the wall with that marker, are you? I'm sort of sternly warning them and expecting them to say, no, I am not going to. If Greek were to ask that question, it would introduce it with a may, with this negative particle, rather than ou. So ou expects a yes answer, may expects a negative or no answer. So another quick recall and preview quiz. So what I've done here is mixed in different kinds of pronouns. Some of these should look familiar to you. Some of them will not look familiar to you. So I want you making guesses on those ones that aren't familiar to you, and I'm going to correct your guesses here. So what you're doing is matching the kind of pronoun from the right-hand column to the Greek word over here. So you can just on your whiteboard list 1 to 7 and then write which kind of pronoun each one of these is. All right, your answers may not look like this at all because you probably took a lot of guesses, and that's great. That's exactly what I asked you to do. So for doing what I asked you to do, let's high five. 1, 2, 3, high five, boom. So these first 3 and then this last one are all pronouns that we have not seen yet, that have not been introduced in this class. T is what is called an interrogative pronoun. It's going to ask a question or interrogate something. And I want to call attention to the accent here, that it has the accent, and this is going to be one of your clues to the interrogative. Tenos is an indefinite pronoun. It's going to be translated like someone or a certain one. It's not referring to any particular entity. And I want you to notice here by way of preview that there is no accent anywhere on tenos, in distinction from the accent here on T. Hos is a relative pronoun, who, which, what. And I want you to notice with respect to this one, the rough breathing mark. I know it's probably small on your screen, but this is a rough breathing mark with the accent there. That rough breathing mark is going to be one of your clues to the relative pronoun. Autois is a personal pronoun, a third person. We've seen this one before. It's dative, masculine or neuter, plural. Kainos is a farther demonstrative, a nominative, masculine, singular. Two-tone is a nearer demonstrative. So remember, by way of a reminder, nearer is this, farther demonstrative is that. The thing nearer is here, this here, that over there is farther. So two-tone is a genitive plural, masculine, feminine, or singular based on its ending here. And then allelus is what's called a reciprocal pronoun. It's going to be translated of one another. So we're going to get to these new forms in just a moment here. And whether or not you recognize these other forms, the self-correction will help you by way of review. So let's return to the basics of pronouns. And this is going to be a slide that you have seen 2 or 3 times now, and I'm repeating it because repetition is helpful for us to remember things. So as I said for the quiz, a pronoun is, as you probably said as well, a pronoun is a word that stands in place of another word. Its antecedent is the word that it stands in place of. And a pronoun is going to match its antecedent in what? That's right, gender and in number. So when we say antecedent, we mean the noun to which a pronoun refers. And we have different types of pronouns in Koine Greek. We've seen personal and demonstrative pronouns so far. Then the sort of other main categories of pronouns are going to be these ones that we're going to introduce today. We're going to pay particular attention to the forms of the relative pronoun, the interrogative pronoun, and the indefinite pronoun. And we're just going to introduce the forms of the reflexive and the reciprocal pronoun in this video. So as we've said, pronouns match their antecedent in gender and number, but not necessarily in case. Their case is determined on their function in a sentence. And lastly, we've said a few times in this class before that possession in Greek is usually indicated by the genitive case. We translate the genitive of, and one of the common uses of a personal pronoun is to show possession, who possesses something, by putting the personal pronoun into the genitive case. So this is the most common way that Greek is going to show possession, rather than having a separate possessive adjective as we do in English, like my or your. What we're going to see at the end of this video is that there is a possessive adjective, or sometimes called a possessive pronoun in Greek, and we're going to introduce that today as well. But this is going to be more rare than this way of showing possession that you have become accustomed to already in the class. So these next few slides are by way of reminder of our different forms of the pronouns. Here we have the first person personal pronoun in the singular and in the plural, and then the second person. Remember, my mnemonic, or my way of remembering that this is second person, is the sigma, the s sound of second, and then the hoopsilon, a u, meaning you, you all. Another clue to me, when I see these forms, I see that you and I think you, second person. Then over here we of course have we with hey mace, hey moan, etc. And then our third person personal pronouns built on the second declension, the first declension, and then the second declension neuter respectively. So we have our mnemonics down here. These are forms that you are probably pretty well familiar with by this point. And then our nearer demonstrative, usually characterized by toot, with the exceptions in the nominative case where we don't have the tau at the beginning. And then our farther demonstrative with the root ekein here, built again on the second declension in the masculine and the neuter, and the first declension in the feminine. So then I give you here, once again, our swain Ionisus and asina Ionisas, so are colored in here with our red and our yellow respectively for both the nearer and the farther demonstrative. And so if we have swain and asina in play for these other pronouns, we're going to get sasia in play for some of the pronouns that we're introducing in this video, namely the interrogative and the indefinite pronouns. So remember our mnemonic for the third declension. So these are our third declension endings here is sasia esoncias. And our friend down here, sasia, is what you get when you Google sasia, which means double in Italian, double or twin or doppelganger. And this is apparently Adele's doppelganger, according to somebody on the internet. So what we have here, the interrogative pronoun, is the root tin, tau, Yoda, nu, with sasia added on. And notice that, as is always the case in the third declension, the nominative singular and the dative plural are the oddballs. So that when the sigma is added to the 10, that nu doesn't like to stand next to a sigma, so it's going to drop out. And that's the case in both the nominative singular and the dative plural. But we have sasia esoncias, so we have an interrogative pronoun that's inflecting for its different cases. And then over here, these are both masculine and feminine forms. And then over here in the neuter, we have the neuter nominative and accusative in both the singular and the plural being different from one another. So an interrogative pronoun, as to what it does, is it, as its name implies, it interrogates something. It asks a question, who, what, or why, and it can inflect for different forms. So for example, if you have a genitive interrogative pronoun, we're asking whose or of whom, who possesses the thing. Or if you have a dative functioning as the indirect object, to or for whom. So the interrogative pronoun is going to change its form based on its grammatical function in the sentence, or the kind of question that it's asking. And the last thing to note is this T right here, which is our neuter nominative or accusative singular, is going to be translated Y. So this is one of probably the most common form of the interrogative that you're going to see in the Greek New Testament, asking the question why. So moving our slide over, notice we have the exact same forms here. If I move back and forth, and if you're just looking at the paradigm here, the forms are identical to each other except for one thing. So what is it that's different between these two? As I move back and forth, I want you to notice the difference on the paradigm. What is it? That's right, you nailed it. This one does not have the accent. So an indefinite pronoun is not going to have an accent, but it's also going to be built on the third declension, and it is also going to inflect for different meanings depending on its function in the sentence. And I notice a typo here that I'm going to go over with of someone or someone's, showing possession in the genitive. So we're going to have identical in form except for the accent. So there's not going to be any accent for the indefinite pronoun. And an indefinite pronoun, like its name implies, is going to have no particular entity in mind, no particular person or thing in mind. Excuse me. This being the case, it's going to be translated someone, something, or a certain one. It's not quite the same as an indefinite article like a or an in English, but it's sort of approaching that category. And moving on to relative pronouns. This is not a paradigm for the relative pronoun. What is this a paradigm for? That's exactly right. This is a paradigm for the definite article. And I've told you maybe once or twice, maybe even 3 times, that the definite article paradigm, memorizing it is going to go a long way for you in Greek. And once again, your memorization of the definite article paradigm is going to pay off for you here with the relative pronoun, because the forms of the relative pronoun look a whole lot like the forms of the definite article. So notice here that our endings of the relative pronouns, these are relative pronouns, these are the definite articles. They're going to be very, very similar to one another, with the tau absent in the relative pronoun and then something added in there. See if you can tell what it is. I'm sure you can. That's right, the rough breathing mark. So I'm going to give you this a little bit bigger here. Really, actually not that much bigger, but a little bit, so that you can maybe see that these all have rough breathing marks on there. So this is going to be sort of one of your keys to identification. The rough breathing mark is going to be one of your keys of identification to the relative pronoun. So when you see these, your first inclination might be to think definite article, but then when you see that rough breathing mark, you should think rough relative, rough relative, rough relative, that the rough breathing mark indicates the relative pronoun, which is going to be translated who, which, that, or what, and is going to, like the other pronouns, inflect for its meaning. So that who is going to mean whose. It's going to be asking the question, who possesses this? Whose is this? Or whom. Whom is the English form of the object of the relative pronoun. And so we notice here that Han is in the accusative case, which would be the object, the direct object in a sentence. And so like other pronouns, a relative pronoun is going to have an antecedent, and it's going to match that antecedent in gender and number, but not necessarily in case. Its case is going to be dependent on what it is doing in the sentence, what its function in the sentence is. So a little bit more. These last few are not going to have sort of a full-on paradigms form. I'm going to just show you the basic forms of them, or particularly the forms that are going to be used most often in the Greek New Testament. We're going to have a couple of different categories here. The first one is indefinite relative pronouns. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, we have indefinite pronouns and we have relative pronouns. Why? What's going on here? This is, in fact, a combination of the relative pronoun and the indefinite pronoun. So you see that both in the translation, who, which, what, from the relative, and the indefinite, the ever, gives the sense of whoever, whichever one it is, whatever one it is. It doesn't name a particular one. That notion of ever in English removes the notion of a singular or a particular entity and makes it more of a sort of general category. So not only with respect to its translation and its meaning is it going to be a combination of the relative pronoun and the indefinite pronoun, but also in its Greek form. So you notice here that has, hey, hoi, hi, ha, ha, they all have the rough breathing mark. Remember, rough relative, rough relative, rough relative. And so that part is the relative pronoun. And then you have the tis, ti, tenes, tina, which is our forms of the indefinite pronoun. So that combination is the indefinite relative pronoun. And it's going to be translated whoever, whichever, whatever. And these are going to be the 6 most common forms of this in the Greek New Testament. The other ones are rare enough that they're not even worth putting up on the slide, but they're going to follow the endings for tis. So what we put up there for the indefinite pronoun and also the interrogative pronoun, those same endings, if you wanted to fill out these paradigms, would be used from the indefinite and the interrogative paradigms. Reciprocal pronouns, there's only 3 forms of these in the New Testament: allelon, allelois, allelus. Notice we have genitive, dative, and accusative plural in all of these, and they're going to be translated of one another, to one another, and one another respectively, and these are going to be in your vocabulary for the week. And lastly is possessive pronouns or possessive adjectives. So remember back to that first pronoun basics slide, we said that the most usual way that Koine Greek will show possession is with a noun in the genitive case or with a pronoun in the genitive case. That Greek does not normally use a possessive adjective like my or your in English to show possession. That's not to say that it doesn't have a possessive adjective or a possessive pronoun. It does, and they look like this. Hemos in the first person, sos in the second person, isios, this should be idios. Idios in the third person, hemeteros in the first person plural, and humeteros in the second person plural. All of these are possessive pronouns or possessive adjectives, and they will appear in attributive position. So if you wanted to say, my, my son or something, it would be ha. We have the article, and then the adjective, the possessive adjective or possessive pronoun. You'll see it called both. Amos. Huios. So that amos is going with huios. It's modifying it as an adjective in attributive position. Remember, attributive position is when the article is coming right before it. You could also have ha huios, ha amos as attributive position, and it would mean the same thing. My son. So this does occur. You'll see these. And they show possession, but this is not the most common way that Greek will show possession, but it is a way of showing possession that you should be aware of. And again, these are going to be vocabulary words for the week. So what we're going to do here is a recall and preview quiz. No longer preview. Now it's all recall because we presented this information, and you'll notice that these are in the exact same order we answered at the beginning of the lecture. So go ahead and number 1 through 5 and answer these questions here. All right, for your work here, let's go ahead and go for a high five. Boom, you probably got more answers correct this time than you did the first round, and that's exactly the way that this is intended to work. Sort of the confirmation of getting the right answer on the second go round will make this stick in your brain a little bit better. So a pronoun is a word that stands for a noun. It's antecedent, that it's going to match in gender and number. We've seen personal and demonstrative pronouns previously in this class, and in this video we introduced a whole bunch more. Interrogatives, indefinites, and relatives being the most relevant of the ones that we introduced. A relative pronoun, like personal pronouns, will match its antecedent in gender and in number, but not necessarily in case. Its case is determined on its function in the sentence. Words that expect a yes answer will be introduced with oo, and those that expect a negative answer will be introduced with may. And then our recall and preview quiz, and I haven't mixed up the order again, so let's see how we can do matching up our kinds of pronouns with the pronouns in Greek. So here we go. We have T with the accent being the interrogative. Remember, the accent is the key to identification for the interrogative. Tenos without an accent. So if we were to have an interrogative of tenos, it would be tenos with the accent above it, just like this. This would be an interrogative, but this one is an indefinite pronoun without the accent. Hos, rough breathing mark, relative pronoun, rough breathing mark, relative pronoun, rough breathing mark, relative pronoun. Autois, one of those we've been well familiar with, a personal pronoun. Akenos, a farther demonstrative pronoun, that, farther away. Two-tone, a nearer demonstrative pronoun, this, here. And lastly, allelus, a reciprocal pronoun meaning of one another, or just one another in the case of the accusative here. And the last thing we're going to do very quickly is go through 2 sample sentences. You don't necessarily have to write down the answers here. I would encourage you to, but I know we've been doing a lot of writing with the quick quizzes through these videos, but writing down answers will help you, but you don't necessarily need to do it here. So what I want you to do is pause the lecture and see if you can answer these questions based on the Greek and the English that I have given you here, as well as the list of the kinds of different pronouns. All right, I have marked up here our sentence just a little bit. So number 1 was a trick question. There aren't 2 pronouns in the sentence. There are 3 pronouns in the sentence. Sue is a personal pronoun, second person singular. Hamon is a personal pronoun, first person plural in the genitive case. Our father Abraham. And hos is a relative pronoun with a rough breathing mark. So why is tu patros in the genitive case right here? The reason for this has to do with what we have over here with the comparative made zones. Remember, a comparative is going to take a genitive after it. In this case, the verb, the to be verb here, is interrupting our comparative and our genitive, but greater than our father. So the than is implied by the genitive here because the comparative is going to take the genitive. So this is a bit of a review, not from what we've done in this video, but from past lessons. And then why does the sentence begin with may here? This is because it expects a negative or a no answer. You're not greater than our father Abraham who died, are you? Expecting Jesus to say no, or expecting that the answer to that question is no, that Jesus could not be greater than the father Abraham. They're going to be a bit wrong about that though. All right, one more example here. We have, well, actually, I'm not going to read it. Just go ahead and pause and answer these questions again based on the Greek and based on what we have in the English here. All right, so our answers here, the 3 pronouns are, the first one is haute, which is a nearer demonstrative, and this is the promise or the announcement. And then hein with the rough breathing mark is a relative pronoun, meaning which. And then autu is a personal pronoun in the prepositional phrase ap autu, from him. So going down to the antecedent of hein. So remember, a relative pronoun is going to have an antecedent that it matches in gender and in number. So this is an accusative feminine singular, and the word right before it, he angelia, is accusative nominative singular. So we sorry, not accusative nominative singular, feminine nominative singular. So we have this matching in gender and in number. They are both feminine and they are both singular. So the antecedent of hein is he angelia. And hein is in the accusative case because it is the object of the verb akekoamen. So whereas he angelia is the subject of, actually it's the, more technically it's the predicate of the to be verb estin. And this is the message which we have heard. So the thing we have heard, which we have heard, this is a whole, really from hein on, is going to be a relative phrase, which we have heard from him. So the hein is giving us more information about the message, the he angelia. It's referring to it and it's modifying it by giving us more information, saying that we have heard it from him. So again, to put our entire sentence together, and this is the message which we have heard from him, are 3 pronouns here. Haute as the near demonstrative, hein as the relative, and autu as the personal pronoun.